So what's the main way that a mud motor is different from an outboard motor?
So outboard, the biggest problem with an outboard engine is it's water cooled. And in the environments that we take these drives for duck hunting, you will very, very quickly destroy an outboard engine. And of course, the cost associated with an outboard engine is astronomical these days. They've also all gone four-stroke, and a 15 horsepower outboard engine, you can't find any for less than $3,000 now new. And they're typically around between $3,000 and $4,000, and they only go up. But they just simply cannot go in the environments that we take these mud motors. That you will destroy them. That's why they've been such a hit up here. Is simply for running them in the shallow waters, the muddy waters that are full of obstacles and things to wreck a typical outboard.
And what do you need to maintain a mud motor?
There's very little maintenance involved in them other than your oil changes for the engine itself. It's a regular service and same as any other air-cooled engine. On 50-hour intervals, you dump the oil out, put new oil in them. As far as the drives, on the surface drive, there's a chain case that takes a 15 W50 gear oil. That's good for 200 hours. Average cost about $30 to dump the oil out of that, change it. There's a series of bushings in both systems, the surface drive and the longtail alike. Their average life is between 100 and 150 hours, and the replacement costs on them are extremely low, less than $100 to replace all the bushings in both shafts. Aside from that, propellers, which inevitably do get destroyed through the life of them, but that's why we sell them with an extra propeller so nobody gets stuck out in a swamp somewhere where they can't get home. They're quick and very easy to change and very inexpensive. $25 and you can have a new prop. Aside from that, the service is very minuscule.
It's my understanding as well that you've made some significant modifications to these overseas motors so that they last longer in these harsh conditions that they have to operate in. You want to talk about that a little bit?
Yep. So we've created a much more long-lasting bushing. It's a type of high-density polymer that we have milled right in Kingston to the dimensions of our shafts. So once I receive the products from CKS, I remove their bushings and put my bushings in. They seemed they came up with a lot of excuses as to why their bushings were failing. They blamed it on the sand that we have here. Sand is everywhere in the world, but they blamed it on our Canadian sand. It was wearing out their bushings prematurely. So I accepted that and came up with a solution. The other thing that I don't want to say they cheaped out, but the other thing that I didn't like about their units was the throttle mechanism that they were putting on. And the reason I didn't like it is it was a fixed position throttle. So if you put the throttle to half throttle, it remained there. If you put the throttle to full throttle, it remained there without your hand on it. The problem that I had with that is, heaven forbid somebody went overboard while operating the motor, that motor's going to continue to go half throttle or full throttle. And I didn't like that. So we searched and we found what's called an idle return throttle. So it's spring loaded. As long as your hand is on the throttle, you control the position of the throttle. As soon as your hand leaves the throttle returns to an idle. I think that's the difference between somebody, potentially being hurt or someone being able to get back to their boat. If your boat's still at half throttle when you leave it accidentally, well, that thing could go a very long way. If it returns to an idle, at least you have a chance of getting back to it, or the boat, could prevent the boat from damaging itself on a shore or whatever. I just felt it was a much, much better idea to have that thing always returning itself to idle on its own, opposed to that, in my opinion, dangerous fixed position throttle system. That's our difference. Yeah, that's the difference we've come up with.
That's true of the surface drive and the longtail?
Both. Yep. They both have the same identical throttle systems. Yeah. So the competitors are offering this as an additional extra or an add-on. Canadian Mud Motors is including it standard with all of their drives, the idle return throttles and high density polymer bushings in the shaft. We don't believe that safety features are extras. We include them in all of our kits.
Can I use a mud motor for deep water as well?
Absolutely.
So what safety considerations should I consider when operating a mud motor?
The biggest threat anyone has when running in these shallow waters is unseen obstacles, nighttime operations, and just little things hiding under that surface, whether it be a log or a rock, anything like that. It's one of the biggest benefits of running an aluminum prop opposed to a stainless prop. Aluminum takes far less force for it to shatter and break away, which doesn't allow that energy of whatever it is you're striking to travel through that engine and into your arm or into the engine itself, damaging components, cranks and bearings and everything else. But there's always going to be a little bit of risk involved when running those backwaters, those dirty waters and muddy waters. What I tell people is if you're in new waters and you're traveling new channels that you haven't been in before, your first pass is done slow. Give yourself an opportunity to find the obstacles in the water so that you can avoid them when you're traveling at a higher rate of speed. I think that's the best advice that I can give anybody is always make sure you know your course, know the water you're traveling in so that you can avoid collisions with anything that might be hiding under that surface.
Do you require a special license to operate a boat with this kind of motor?
I believe that's something I should look into, but I believe a boating license is required just as it is with an outboard engine or inboard or anything else. It's still a watercraft and it's still going to be used to transit waterways.
So what kind of parts or mechanisms typically wear out with mud motors?
Certainly the most what I've seen is the propellers. It's an event. It's just something that happens when you're duck hunting and when you're in that type of environment again, you're gonna bang up some props. It's gonna happen. I keep hundreds in stock and I try to do my best to keep the most popular sizes in stock. Right now we're fully loaded. And I haven't had any issues yet keeping them in stock. I know the whole world seems to be running out of materials, but luckily we've been able to dodge that one. Certainly props, top of the line is props, and then after that it'd be your final bushings and the shafts, but they're normally good for quite a long time. Surface drive and longtails alike, no matter what it is, if it's one of my kits, there's an extra prop included.
And are parts easy to get?
I haven't had any issues yet. Parts are available. I try to keep at least a bare minimum, a wide selection of props in stock, bushings and shafts. Some occasionally I have seen a couple of bent shafts. So I always keep final shafts in stock. I try to keep everything in stock, as many parts and pieces as I can, always extra kits, both longtail and surface drive. We offer full service for both longtails and mud motors, anything you need as far as repairs or just service.
How easy are these to service on the water if I run into trouble?
Most typically, so if you're looking into difficulties on the water, it's going to be again that common prop strike, and both units, longtail and surface drive, are extremely easy. Props come off, hubs come off in just seconds. The units are sold with a prop wrench that you can keep right in the boat, spin off that prop nut, knock the hub of the prop off, new prop on, literally seconds, you're up and running again. So if you have any questions about surface drives or longtails, contact mudmotorscanada.ca or feel free to call me 613-876-5917.